and welcome to Reliving My Youth. My name is Noel. My guest this week is Dean Butler. Now, you probably best know Dean for portraying Amanzo Wilder, Laura Ingalls Wilder's husband on Little House on the Prairie, and the TV show is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. It's crazy. There are a lot of conventions throughout the country that are already started, and they're going throughout the year. A lot of the cast, including Dean, are at these conventions, and he just released his autobiography called Prairie Man, My Little House, Life and Beyond. It is a fantastic read. I highly recommend purchasing the book. He's a great storyteller and shares a lot of stories about Little House, after Little House, and of course, before he became an actor. The book is available anywhere you can get a book, Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble. Like I said, anywhere you can get a book. If you haven't watched Little House and you know Dean from, let's say, The New Gidget, playing Moondoggie, we talk about that. We also talk about him playing Buffy's dad, Hank Summers, on the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then he stepped back and he went behind the camera producing the TV show Feherty for the Golf Channel, starring golfer David Feherty, where he goes around the world interviewing amazing people. Feherty's an interesting character, and Dean shares some great stories about him. And Dean's an interesting guy as well. He shares some stories from his book and, from other stories about his life. Really great guy, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dean. Dean, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I just read your memoir, Prairie Man, My Little House, Life and Beyond. Fantastic read. You are a very easy going storyteller. It's a great look back at your life before you got famous and after Little House. Just um just let me know how you got started writing the book, and was this something you always wanted to do?
Writing a book was in in all candor, Noel, writing a book was not something that was high on my priority list. I think I was just fearful of that process. I have a lot of respect for people who do that. And my thinking, I was just a little afraid. Do I have something to say about this experience? And when I finally sort of came to the conclusion that like all of us who have had an experience, we each have a unique place in that total experience. And what I arrived at as I looked at the 50th anniversary of the series coming in 2024 this year, and as I was 22, sort of early 2022, starting to think about this in a really serious way. It was probably late 21. um, I came to the conclusion that if I did have something to say about it, because I have a unique place in that situation, as we all do. All of us have a unique place in it, and so this was and if there was a time to say it, it was coming into the 50th anniversary or within the 50th anniversary year of the show, where there would be a higher level of interest on the program, and because of its 50-year run. And it just seemed like it was just the right time to step in.
Uh, are you and me like celebrating the 50th anniversary? My wife, who is like a super fan, I tried to get her to join us today, but unfortunately she's a kindergarten teacher, so she couldn't really, stop her class to do it. I'm like, why don't you get someone to
Yeah.
cover your class for a little bit? She's like, I tried, I really couldn't. But
Uh,
I am. She had one question to ask, and her question was, did you enjoy or do you still enjoy cinnamon chicken?
I've never had cinnamon chicken.
Okay.
I have never had it, and I'm told there's a recipe for it. Allison Arngrim and I
Yeah.
always joke about this because Allison does her show about who's going to do the cooking, and she's talked about preparing this for me at some point, and till we could test it out. Um, Yeah, I've never tasted. It's sort of an odd combination of flavors, and
Right.
Michael had a fun thing. I think this was a his first um he first played with cinnamon and cayenne pepper back in an earlier season in a scene between Mary and Adam, where in the blind school someone mixed up cinnamon with cayenne pepper and baked pies or something, and so the pies were, the pies became unedible as a result of that. And he ran that back
Right.
in season 6 for this moment with Almanzo and Nellie, with Laura in the kitchen, and it was fun. I think, and I didn't realize that until sometime later, where we were watching episodes, and suddenly and it was a little scene. It was this Adam and Mary scene was a very short scene, and not it wasn't particularly focused. It was just a little bit of a, you know in passing kind of a comment that was made. But I think the idea of playing with cayenne and cinnamon sort of appealed to Michael, and he came back to it again for this Laura Almanzo Nelly moment that I had.
So your reaction in that scene was that was authentic, or is that just
Well,
act?
authentic in the sense that it was what the way I chose to play it. There, with actors in those kinds of moments, Noel, you never would put, like, when people are asked to drink alcohol on
Right.
screen or whatever,
Or
you're
smoke or whatever.
generally
Right.
not drinking alcohol. If you're smoking, yes, you're probably smoking a real cigarette of some kind. But with things like that, with spices, hot, cold, all of this, you're generally keeping the actor as the actor in a neutral position, and then you're allowing the actor is invited to bring to that moment whatever they have. So you would never deliberately choke the
Right.
actor, or put something really hot in the food and ask them to deal with that, because you always want the actor to be in control of the reaction. So you don't really want to put the actor in serious distress. Now, we had a moment later, in that, or later, I guess, was it? I guess it was late in season 6, where Almanzo gets sick and is packed in ice.
Right.
And I often have gotten the question, well, was it real ice, or was it sort of glycerin ice, plastic ice? No, it was real ice, but it served a purpose because Almanzo was supposedly had a high fever. And of course, high fever brings chills. And so packing in ice enhanced the chills of the high fever. Marlon Brando, and I would never compare myself or connect myself to Marlon Brando in any
Right.
way other than in this, to explain this moment. In Mutiny, in Marlon Brando's version of Mutiny on the Bounty, when he is burned badly at the end, and he's dying of these burns. I mean, he's severely injured of these, with the burns that he had. And to play that moment, he, using the same logic, he sat on a bed of ice as he did the scene. At least this is how the story goes.
Right.
To have the cold, the chill that he would have being severely burned. And I thought it was very effective. Now, Michael did not consult with me about Marlon Brando and using ice in this moment, but I thought it was very effective, and it's been a question that's come at me for years. So it's sort of a fun thing. That is a condition where the actor would allow themselves to be manipulated to get. I mean, where I was okay with being manipulated to get a response that was sort of anatomically correct.
How many takes was that scene though?
It wasn't physically correct, physiologically correct, not
Right.
anatomically. There's nothing anatomical about it.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
No, sorry.
that's okay. How many takes was that scene?
Oh, I think you did that. We were pretty efficient in the way we worked,
Okay.
and something like that would have been, I would imagine, very few takes. And
Right.
I think there was one point in the middle of it where the ice was unpacked, or maybe it was two parts of a scene or something. It was two parts of the scene that were done. But we worked pretty efficiently, and something like that, where there is so much of it is about the physicality. If you can get in the right space physically, the work really takes care of itself in a lot of ways. And something like that, being chilled or being feverish or whatever, the actors can step into that stuff uh pretty easily and play that. I mean, that's the stuff you look for. That makes the playing of the moment. It allows the moment to take care of itself in many ways.
Right. I don't want to really, delve into the book too much. I want people actually to read it and get it. But there was one thing I do want to talk about. I'm not going to ask you what, your thoughts about Michael Landon. People can read that. But the one thing that really intrigued me was the whole story about you going limp or not going limp.
Oh, right. Going
Yeah.
limp in the fight. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was just, chalk that up to just exuberance and yeah, over exuberance in a moment is the way I'd have to chalk that up. And I definitely, Michael wanted people to, he wanted people to come in ready to work and ready to deliver and work quickly and efficiently. And I was certainly ready to do the work, but I was not as focused on the technique in that moment that you would want to bring to that. And he tried to help me until he'd had enough, and just leave it at that.
Hmm.
And it was a sobering moment. Um, it was a sobering moment to come off my feet and take flight for just a second. We can leave it at that. No, but it was sobering, and I'd never had that kind of a problem ever again.
Right. Yeah. I could imagine. And I did like his response about when you asked him like what you need to read to kind of get, in sync with the character. And it's like the only thing you need to read is what I write.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was so Michael. And at the time you sort of think, well, gee, that's a little, maybe there'd be something else. But really, when you're stepping into a world that one person is crafting, and the stories are coming from him, and obviously adaptations in some cases from the Little House books, and his staff of writers that he had. It was a small staff of writers that were pitching him ideas. And um, really, at that point, the point I came into it, it was season 6. The show was really functioning incredibly smoothly and efficiently, and it was working. And he had a very strong feel for what he was trying to do. He was right. All I really needed to focus on was what he was writing, and then I just had to put myself in that place, and it was all going to be fine. Um, and you don't necessarily, maybe I didn't really recognize that at the moment that I was asking that question. But I think he was, as as with most things where Michael was concerned, he was he was on target with what he was asking for and why he asked for it.
Right. And in regards with the book, you are pretty descriptive with a lot of these stories. Had you like documented them over the years, or is this something that you just had stored in your head?
Well, I think the process of the when I sat down to work on this, I think stories sort of unfold like the peeling back of an onion, and one thing leads to another thing and leads to another thing. And so I don't think they were not right at the top of my mind, and yet things having to do with interactions with Michael Landon stayed with me. They they always stayed with me. And he was a very he was a formidable character. As a person, as a human being, a formidable human being to deal with. And incredibly bright, very capable. He had a lot going on with him. And because he was the reason I was there, I was very attuned to what he was saying. And I mean, other than missing, and I'm sure there were other things too, but in reference to the question about go limp, all right, I missed that cue. But I was very exuberant and enthusiastic about what the moment was. And so I sort of jumped to that and lost track of the technique. But no, Michael was someone who's, anybody who worked with Michael on the series had a very strong impression of him. This was not someone that you would brush past at all. I mean, the nuances, so many nuances would stay with you because he was just that kind of person. You couldn't not take what he was saying and doing seriously.
And I guess you can thank Michael for being on this show.
No question.
If he would have asked Melissa Gilbert, that would have been a different story, I'd imagine, with
Yes.
with the age difference. But I mean,
Yeah.
I guess the factual, Almanzo and Laura were 10 years apart, right? And the show, you
Yes.
guys were only 8. So I guess
Correct.
that be a little bit better.
But it
But
was a different 10 years. Like by the time
right,
they got married, she was 18.
gotcha. Okay,
So when we're playing this moment now, look, I don't know that the real Laura at 18 years old had, and you only can go with the way she writes it. I mean, we
right,
really don't know what her life experience was, but you just sort of imagine in that time, it was, things were there was not a lot of exploratory dating going on, at least the way she wrote it.
right.
There weren't a lot of options where she wasn't meeting a lot of people. You just sort of sense that it was a very different world that she was in. And so in some ways, in a lot of ways, Melissa's naivete and lack of experience in her life was actually probably pretty analogous to what the place that Laura was in when they really stepped into this relationship. But I think there was a different sense of it. There was kind of an inevitability to what they were doing. Young people, and the way she wrote it, young people paired off pretty quickly once they started pairing off, and they made decisions about who they were going to be with, and that was it. And they went with that. It was just, they didn't have that option of being surrounded by, dozens, if not hundreds of potentially eligible partners.
Right.
They had, maybe there were 4 or 5, 6 people that they could end up with. And so things worked differently.
Yeah, and if there was any, awkwardness between the two of you, it didn't show on camera because I feel that kiss was like that whole scene was beautifully done, and it was just very innocent. I mean, I know if there was a lot of like, uproar about the age difference, but I think it was a very innocent, beautiful kiss that worked out, advancing the storyline.
Well, I agree with you, Noel. It did work out. And as much as it felt potentially awkward, but whatever was working in that moment between us translated nicely. I mean, the audience doesn't need to know it's not important that the audience knows what's really going on
Right.
between the actors involved. What's important is what they see, and how it is crafted, how it's scored, how it's the emotional life that is. I mean, it's interesting. You think you really triggered something, an interesting thought for me. I mean, if David Rose had written music that captured what Laura or what Melissa was really thinking, that scene would have come across very differently. As it was, David Rose was scoring what the character was supposed to be feeling, and what the audience wanted Laura to be feeling, what they were hoping she would be feeling. And so it had this beautiful, innocent, sweet quality to but that was maybe not really what Melissa was feeling in those moments.
Right. And it just
Yeah.
goes to show you how important music is in a scene.
Oh, it's huge,
Yeah.
huge. Yeah,
It's
music is enormously important. You
yeah.
put a different cue in that scene, it's an entirely different scene.
Right. Or say if you watch a movie like say Back to the Future without any music, it's a
Oh
lot
my God.
different. You know,
Yeah.
then
Oh,
it's
I could,
yeah.
yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's just any movie,
Yeah.
you change that. I mean, I think one of the reasons it's interesting, one of the reasons why the remake of Little House that was done back in 2006 by Ed Friendly for Disney's Wonderful World of Color, um, I think one of the reasons it didn't work as well as perhaps it could have is because the music just didn't work.
Yeah.
and and I don't know how that decision was made, but the music was just sort of cold and unemotional. And I think that the Little House audience, based on the way it was done, with the way the original done, was prepped for a deep emotional life. This was what David Rose brought to Little House is incalculably important. He gave he imbued all of these characters with this enormously rich emotional life. And it didn't matter what people were really feeling in given moments. It was important that the work, but it's that subtextual experience that the composer brings to the actor that tells you so much and informs the audience so beautifully about what they're supposed to be feeling, and what the characters are feeling. um and David's contribution to that, where Little House was concerned, was just off the charts huge. And I think that music is one of the critical reasons, beyond the cast, beyond the writing. It's right up there in the top two or three reasons why the show is as successful as it was, because the music was absolutely gorgeous, scored with a 60-piece orchestra on a sound stage every week. um, the cues were just, the audience at home. I sat in scoring sessions
Okay.
when I was started on the show, and I loved doing that. And what the audience heard at home on their little 3-inch speaker on their television did not do justice to, as good as it was when you heard it on television. To hear it with the orchestra in a studio playing against the picture, it was mind blowing how incredible it was. And you just, and that's the one part of, when you can restore pictures. You can, the picture was in 2014 for the 40th anniversary, was redone
Right.
entirely, or was corrected, for a modern standard. And the show is more beautiful now if you buy the DVDs or watch it on television. It's far more beautiful now than it was when it was new, because the screens are better, the color correction technology is better. You can clean up the audio. You can take some of the noise out of that mag track that it's based on. But to go back and restore that and make it new again, that would be a Herculean task, because I don't think those stems exist
Right.
anywhere to go back and redo that again. So we're it can be maybe enriched a little bit, and the dynamic range of it can be, the sense of it could be made bigger, but you're never going to really be able to change and upgrade the audio to be what we all heard when we were on the scoring stage. That was just amazing.
Right. And I mentioned, my wife, she was, like a lunatic fan, in a
A
good way,
lunatic fan.
a good way. Well,
Yeah,
fan
in
is
a
short
yes,
for,
no, a super fan. She's a bonnet
yeah,
head.
yeah, of
Your
course.
your wife is a full-on bonnet head, is the way you're describing her.
Right. And, fan is short for fanatic. So it makes
Yes.
complete sense.
Yes.
So yeah, was it when they announced all these conventions this year, we actually got tickets, or we got a hotel room originally for the one in Minnesota.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and then they announce they're coming to Connecticut over
Hmm.
the summer. So
Oh,
we're
of
like,
course. Right.
let's just do that one because it's a lot closer, be a lot cheaper.
Sure.
It's fine.
Sure.
And then
Sure.
they, 'cause I guess overwhelming demand, they originally going to have, I think, the Warner Theater.
Hmm.
And then they moved it to Hartford into like the convention center because I guess overwhelming demand, which rightfully so. So we can't wait to do that in September. But 50 years. I mean, are you still surprised the show is this relevant now?
I there's a part of me that's it's probably yes and no. I think, the yes part probably comes from the reality that our pop culture is so, the zeitgeist of what drives pop culture is it's just always changing. And we are very quick to dismiss something that is not considered current and cool in the current culture. But on the no side, Little House was never cool, and it was never modern. It was old when it was new. It was never cool. Although I think that it has, for people who love it, a certain kind of cool factor in its sweet nostalgia, that it has. But um, I think the thing that makes it so timeless is the fact that the humanity that is written about and portrayed in episode after episode is, it's bigger. It's simple, but it's bigger than life. And we've talked about music. The music is part of what makes that emotional life bigger than life. Um, and I think people crave that. I think, you know, we emotional life has become so careful in our culture. We can't say things, we can't do things, we can't, and maybe a lot of that is, I mean, I think we're in a, there's always this pendulum swing going on, and I think we are in a very careful time in our culture right now for a lot of good reasons. um I'd like to think that over time that will balance out as we arrive at some new normal, whatever, and then we'll relax with these things again and not be, and maybe we are in the process of relaxing with it now. Maybe it is getting better, and we won't really. I don't know if we'll know that until we can examine this period a decade from now, 2 decades from now, and really sort of do a comparative on it. I don't know that we really fully understand, but uh, I do think that people crave the simplicity and the just the purity of the messaging that goes on about family and community and love and acceptance and forgiveness and um, those very wonderful qualities, that Little House brings. I think the clarity of them is something that those who love the program continue to crave. Um, and it continues to find new audiences, which is just a wonderful gift for all of us. I talk about in the book that Michael said we'd all be, people would be watching and loving the program long after we were all gone. At the time, that seemed a little far fetched,
Right.
but I was 25 at the time when I heard him say that. When you're 25, you are immortal. Nothing can touch you. You're going to go on forever. Now, getting ready to turn 68 this year, I have a different view of all of that, and it does feel to me like, now, I mean, I'm really certain that the show will go on long after we're all gone, as long as there's a commitment technologically to keeping it up to date. But now that the program has gone digital, which was a huge step, now that the show is in a digital form, it could go on forever and ever and ever. I mean, until there's a new, whatever the digital standard changes and it's
Right.
something else, and then someone would have to be willing to update it to that. it's all about the companies who are willing to invest in it. And the reason they invest in it is because it continues to work and people continue to watch it and love it. So, as long as people keep watching and loving it, it will get updated to whatever the current standard is.
Yeah, I mean it's on my house every day. She has them, she not mention the DVDs, but having it on the DVR or whatnot. I think it's
Yeah.
on one of the Hallmark channels,
Yeah.
many channels it's on. It might be
Sure.
on the Weather Channel too. Who knows? It's on a lot of channels.
I
But
don't know if it's on the Weather Channel,
yeah,
but yeah, there
right.
are too many hurricanes
Yeah,
and
right.
tornadoes out there now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. But you mentioned all the themes, and all those themes are evergreen, whether you put
Yeah.
the show in the 1800s or a show in the 24th century. Those are themes that are can live, forever, and just the basis of a good television show.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that Michael was telling little morality tales. And he gave the opportunity to model good behavior and to consider the consequence of not good behavior. And it in episode after episode after episode, you see that, and it's very simply, cleanly drawn. You don't have it's not hidden. It's right there, right in front of you to see it and experience what happens to people who operate in a particular way. And I think that's a big part of that universality, timeless appeals, that you just see the humanity, and it comes at you. It's crystal clear, and parents have the opportunity to consider how they want to raise their children. They have the opportunity to consider what kind of parents they want to be. They have the opportunity to consider the communities that how they want to be a part of their community. And children have a very, have a really clear message about maybe the best way for them to behave. And so it sort of transcends age. It transcends periods of time. And I agree with you. No, the messages are universally clear.
And even before I met her, we're going on, being together for 30 years now, I'd watch it, and, Channel 11, New York City, 5 o'clock every
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
watching, the show. It was great. And I always joke with her now because my favorite episode, just because I joke with her about, Carrie. It's like, oh, did Carrie fall down the well this episode? And, she just gives me a look like she's like, no, she did not, and then it turns on. Because I even know right now, at the beginning of the episode, when she does fall down the well. So I'll
Sure.
kind of put it on and I'm like, she fell down the well this episode. She's like, this is the episode she fell down the well. Yes. So
One of the funny stories that came out of that is that, what one sister falls down the well and it's the other sister
that
who
comes
comes
up.
out of the
Yeah.
well. And yeah, and so yeah, I think it's Rachel that fell down the well and Sydney came out. So Rachel's still down there somewhere.
Somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's funny. And maybe for the 60th anniversary, she'll
Yeah,
come
we'll
back
find
up.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll come out. Right,
Right.
exactly.
I had Allison on early on in this podcast, and I love her. She's fantastic. My
Yeah,
wife, I saw
she
her,
is.
her one woman show in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the thing you said that Melissa now is kind of the leader now, but Allison's more, I think, the gatekeeper. I think you used as the term.
She's the I've described her as the welcome wagon.
The welcome. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, she's the welcome wagon. Yes, Melissa is the center. Allison is the heart and soul of the show at this point, in terms of just how she interacts with everybody, and her willingness and her intention to stay connected to it is very, very powerful. I think Melissa is all in on it now in a way that, um, because of Modern Prairie and what she's doing there, and it's it's in sync for her now, and she's speaking to women in a particular way, and the show is a wonderful way to connect with women. Melissa has an enormous cachet, having the fact that she will always be Laura Ingalls Wilder
Right.
to people. That's just, you can't touch that. But in terms of really embracing everybody, and making the time to embrace everybody, I don't think anyone just would dispute that it's really Nasty Nelly that is that really is the one that touches everybody and regularly and does it in a really lovely way. I mean, Allison is just she's irrepressible,
Yeah.
and she comes at it with such love and such a sense of fun, and she just draws people right in.
Now, was there ever a time that you kind of wanted to distance yourself from Almanzo?
I think in the very when initially when the show was first over, um, you're looking to see what can come next, and of course when you've been on and so I was with Little House for 5 seasons, half the time basically. I mean, well, it actually was a little less than half the time because the 10th season was an abbreviated
Right, the
three
movie.
movie
Yeah.
experience to wrap it up. um, but you need to feel it, or you're want to be positioned to feel like you can go on, and part of that positioning is drawing a new picture of yourself, or trying to be positioned differently within by your representation to have you considered in a different kind of a way. So yeah, I did try and change that, but it didn't take, after a decade of the show being over, I was starting to come back to it. It probably, maybe it was a little bit more than that, actually. But I'd done a few events, and the cast had done a few different events
Right.
related to, saying, reconnecting with each other. But I don't think it was really till, 20 years,
Hmm.
15, 20 years after it was over, that all of this, that the energy really began to build around remembering it and appreciating it, and reconnecting fans with cast members and doing events. And maybe it was less than that, but I sort of have this feeling like, early 2000s is where it really started, at least for me. That's when it really started, and it became very real to me at that point. Again, it surprised me, I think. I just it felt like it was something that was always there and a
Right.
part of me, but I didn't feel like I wasn't plugged into it in the same way and I think it was probably after I want to say it was a first trip to Walnut Grove, or it was a first trip to Mansfield, Missouri, to Rocky Ridge Farm, where Laura and Almanzo built their place. It, and there were 1,000 people there at I mean, I think about Mansfield. There were 1,000 people there to in this beautiful setting in the fall of the year, and the leaves were gorgeous, and the house, the farm looked beautiful, and 1,000 or more people there to hear whatever story I was going to tell about this. And as always with Little House, it's that love and affection that you feel from people. It just blows your mind. I've said this. I've said this for years. I totally believe it, or I mean, it's real for me now. Other than my immediate family, um, who has been very, very important to me in my evolution, and the sense of who I am. The Little House family is the most important relationship beyond my immediate family. The Little House family is the most significant, impactful relationship in my life. And when I say the Little House family, that not only is that the show family, but it's also the fan family, the Laura Ingalls Wilder aficionados that are devoted and dedicated to all things Laura. The love and affection that's come at me from those people has just been sustaining. It has been defining to me, and I have loved the honor of being associated with that. It's because the affection is so real, so genuine, so strong that to be a part of that is just an incredible gift. And I know that, there are people who are parts of things like this, iconic things like this, have a similar experience that I have. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been really, really good. I mean, look, if my career had been a different career, if my career had gone in a completely different direction, Little House might not have had the staying power for me that it has. But I have I have absolutely zero regrets about the way this has all gone. And I, because of what Little House is and what it represents to people, I feel, and because of the part that I played, my place in this feels very, very secure, and very, I'm sort of right in the, in the sweet spot of all of this. And that's just a great feeling. And I'm very grateful for it. And I choose to honor it in every way that I can, by the things that I do, and the way I interact with people. That's just important to me, that's always a good experience.
Right. And I'm sure seeing cast members that you haven't seen for decades. I know Jonathan Gilbert just recently went to one of the
Well,
events and he's
well,
very
he came to
surprised.
Simi Valley. I mean, it was just, we hadn't seen Jonathan, and I hadn't seen Jonathan in 40 years.
Right.
Nobody had. I mean, Melissa had barely seen him in those years. And for Jonathan to walk in an entirely different, visually, an entirely different human being than he was the last time we saw him, and yet see him so happy to be there. I think he was a little overwhelmed by that.
Right.
He chose to come to Simi Valley, which is the largest Little House event that's ever been done. 18,000 people over
Wow.
3 days from
Right.
27 countries. Um, just the energy in the event was absolutely incredible. And Jonathan's choice to come to that particular event, and he was encouraged enormously by his sister to do that. I think he'd been invited to many events in the past and had always pulled the plug at the 11th hour,
Right.
and just ultimately chosen not to appear. I'm so glad he came to this one. And I think if Jonathan, I mean, the value here was that Jonathan got to see in a very powerful way the level of affection that follows him
Right.
in all of this. And he got to see that and feel that. And he could not have not been deeply touched by that. And I think the things he said about the event since, or about what he felt, I think confirm that. But it just, he got a hero's welcome. Um, you know, and he played his part. He went, in our recreation of the schoolhouse church.
And so he
He
went in the
did those
corner.
pictures
Yeah.
where he went and stood in the corner, and
Yeah.
it was awesome. He stuck his tongue out and stood in the corner.
Yeah.
People absolutely went wild. And that may seem like a sort of a mundane thing to do, but he stepped right in there and played right along and did what fans were hoping he would do, and he delivered. And I hope he chooses to deliver again and again for fans, because he'll be wonderfully received.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm hoping he'll make it to the Connecticut one.
Yeah,
Cool. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now the show, like, or I guess you can say the last movie literally went out with a bang,
Yes, it
with the
did.
town blowing up.
Yeah, yeah.
How emotional was that seeing that, you know, live and being on set for that?
Well, so it was done in different phases. So
Right.
it was the explosions that everybody saw in a matter of 2 minutes were a 3 day took place over a 3 day period, or maybe more days depending
Okay.
on what the locations were. But the first day was the rolling out of the blasting wire, the attaching it to the plunger, the pulling up of the plunger, the pressing down of the plunger. and the reaction that we hadn't, we didn't see anything explode, but there are reactions to it, which were in most cases pretty stoical. And I think that was the right way to play it because we didn't know what it was going to look like when it actually exploded. The second big event was the actual shooting of the explosions. And that was a minimum crew. There were, 8 or 10 people, camera crew primarily. Then there was Simi Valley Fire Department and, all of these, a lot of people for safety's sake, because there were the special effects people who wired up these buildings with blasting wire that was just like off the charts, big explosive charges in these buildings so that they would really go, and they did. And then of course they were rolling 5 or 6 cameras on these things, some in real, actual speed, others in slow motion, from multiple angles. And so when this was all cut together, these explosions were just, they were huge and highly visual. And so there was that day. And I think for Michael and Kent McCrae and the camera people the camera crew who had been there for years, I think this was a very emotional day for them. I think it was like they really were faced with the end in a very visceral way, because they were there capturing the explosions. And then the third day was the day when, and it was very shortly thereafter, I want to say it was within a day, maybe the next day after the explosions were done, that we shot that exiting of Walnut Grove and the aftermath and the community there. And there were smoke pots and all of the sets. So they were, the smoke was rising as we all arrived on the location. And it was just stunning.
Right.
It was shattering. And I think for those who had been there around it for 10 years, it had to have been just otherworldly to see it. And even after 5 years, I know I was just sort of numb looking at it. And, when you look at and everyone had completely different reactions, and there was no direction given that day. No direction was needed. You just had to look at what you were seeing, and wherever that took you was going to be right. And, everyone had a different take on it. It was, but it was really strong to see that. And it was, we were all in our own heads about what this meant and what it felt like. And there wasn't a lot of talk with anybody. I don't recall, a huge amount of conversation that day going on. I think everyone was just sort of taken by what we were seeing in front of us. And that was all you needed, was to see that smoke rising from all those buildings. It was just shattering.
Yeah, well, and the finished product is, extremely emotional, and it ended, the series on kind of like, very emotional moment, so to speak.
Yeah, it was, and I think it served a couple of purposes. I mean, this is Michael. When Michael was told, there was a lot of talk in the office. I mean, NBC had canceled it, and it was, I don't think the cancellation was expected. And so Michael lobbied for these 3 movies to be able to button it up in some form or fashion. I mean, the reality is it was really the last farewell that was the button up. The 2 other movies were just other stories. There was A Christmas Story, and then there was the story of Albert and his illness. And we don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of debate about whether Albert really died or not.
Yeah.
But that's fun too. It's sort of ongoing conversation within the community, but it was really the last farewell that was the button up. And what was I going with that? What was the question? What led me to, what were we on to here?
Oh, just, I mean, it was the last, scene ending the series being very emotional.
Yeah.
And,
So
Michael kind of knowing
oh,
that.
I know what it was. No,
canceled.
I know where I was. So once he got the 3 the deal to do the three, he had to figure out what he was going to do. And as he was
Right.
formulating this end, Kent McCrae, our producer, um, told him that when this is over, we have to, part of what we have to accomplish here is we have to erase Walnut Grove from Big Sky Movie Ranch. It has to go away. It had been
Right.
there for 10 years. The contract required that the land be returned to its original condition. Well, this opened the door to Michael to think about how he wanted to do this. And I think there were a couple of things in play for him. Michael was always interested in the best story possible and the best visual possible. The other thing that was working in him is that, and he had anxiety, I think, about other people working on our sets. If they had not had to be destroyed, if they were just allowed to stand,
Right.
the idea that they could show up in other shows, other movies, redressed perhaps, but they would all look different, but people might know what they were. And he did not want that. He wanted Walnut Grove to live in the life of the show, but not have any sort of other cultural reverberations showing up elsewhere. So when he had the opportunity, when he was told that he had to remove all of the sets, everything had to go away. The story goes that Kent McCrae told, and Kent was just like so in tune with what Michael was doing. They were like brothers, these two guys. And Michael said to Kent, just give me an hour or so. I want to think about this. And Michael goes away and I think closes the door in his office and sits there. And I don't know what his process was. I think Michael, I bet he didn't make a note about this, although he might have sketched written some notes out, but he basically came back an hour later and pitched the story to Kent about how he wanted to end it. And it accomplished both things. It gave him an ending that ensured that that these sets would not be there again, and that he would not be asked to go back to this ever again. I think he was really ready for it to be over. So this gave him an ending that was irreversible. It was a huge visual ending and total closure. So it accomplished what he wanted to accomplish, and it did it in this incredibly strong visual way. So it was Michael being Michael, and he got what he wanted out of it. He ran it the way he wrote it, directed it, started it the way he wanted it to be, and he finished it the way he wanted to do it. And with crystal clear vision about what he was trying to accomplish. He was an amazing creative person. I don't know that Michael gets enough credit for how good he was at what he was doing. And there are great showrunners
Right.
in the industry, but there are very few showrunners who could add superstar to their litany of writing, directing, producing. Then for Michael, you have to add, that matinee idol presence in front of the camera. I mean, it's just there's just nobody else like him in the modern, in his era of television, and since, really. I mean, there are a few, but few people who are doing great things, but covering all the bases. But Michael is a very rare presence in the industry, and I think he needs to be honored for that always.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. Totally. And all the pressure that he was on, basically, running everything.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, and to think, Noel, that Michael left us at 54 years old.
I know.
54 years old. I mean, he was a young man still. And yet, when you look at what he had done in his life and the level of excellence that he'd been associated with in this highly competitive environment. He wasn't just doing this in some, in some sort of anonymous circumstance. Michael was doing what he was doing in full view of the television world, um, in one of the most, which is, was and remains one of the most cutthroat, competitive environments that you can work in. And the fact that he was a fixture in television for 30 years, for 3 decades of his life, um, I mean, it's just extraordinary what he did. That even makes it more amazing. And I think one of the beautiful things is that as much as Michael passed at 54 years old, he's never left us.
Right.
He remains a constant presence in the lives of people who love what he did on an ongoing basis, with nothing diminished at all. He is there every day, multiple times a day, at full power, with everything, all of his gifts on full display. There are very few places, I mean, other than filmed entertainment or recorded entertainment, where you can get that, where everything he did is right there to see and it doesn't go away. And it's remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's switch gears for one sec. I know a couple of the Laura Ingalls Wilder books are coming up in a couple of years, right, for public domain.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
true. Well,
yeah.
the first one,
The first,
Little House in the Big Woods, will, I think, in 2 years,
right. Is
start
and
to enter the public
yeah,
domain.
is anyone kind of nervous about that? Like what could happen? You can end up seeing like the Ingalls being in modern day Detroit or modern day Los Angeles in a movie or something like that. Did you kind of feel a little nervous about what could happen?
Well, I think that and I haven't had, an in-depth conversation with the Friendly family, who owns the film and television rights to Little House. What they have done as a protection, is that they have trademarked Little House on the Prairie as a. So if you're going to deal with Little House on the Prairie, they own they own everything around that title.
Okay.
And so, as much as the books themselves may go into the public domain, the ability to exploit the books, in visual media, uh, I think, is going to remain restricted. And I, I think that they have been way out in front of this.
Okay, good.
As a look, and I think there are probably, you could say there are pros and cons to that. I mean, maybe a fresh set of eyes on this would yield something that was different, unique, and powerful in its own way. And that's the whole reason for things going into the public domain, is to open the door to creativity to other people. And so I think there are probably good things about that. But on the other hand, the Friendly family has been associated with this brand for half a century, and they have nurtured it and protected it and taken all the steps to do that. And so, they have done the work to continue to guide the exploitation of this property. So I think it remains to be seen what will happen, and I don't think any of us really fully understand. I think the trademark is a big deal,
Right.
but the practical implication of that moving forward, I think, is yet to be tested.
Right. Because recently we saw like, Winnie the Pooh going to public domain and they ended up making a horror movie about him.
No,
So,
see,
you know,
that would not be something we would, and what a bummer for Winnie the Pooh.
right.
Uh,
So it'd
but
be interesting to see what
yeah,
happens.
yeah, Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's going to be a very big thing. And I think if the Friendly Family being as proactive as they are about this, I think they have probably, I feel like they've got this buttoned up, but we won't know till we know.
I was also a big fan of the new Gidget.
Mm,
And, I people don't really know what syndication means anymore because it's a
yeah,
different S word, being streaming. But
yeah.
yeah, that was a fun show. You're obviously playing a different type of character,
Yes,
Moondookie.
it was more of a cartoon than
Yeah.
and
Ex-
it became that. The pilot that started that was a sort of a traditional rom-com.
right.
Gidget's Summer Reunion was a felt like it was the kind of thing that you might see today, in a romantic comedy. But because of first run syndication, which is how it was uh, brought back into existence, it was going to have the show premiered along with a wheel of 5 other shows that included Charles in Charge
Right.
and the New Monkeys, and I'm trying to think of the other two shows. Maybe
What's
there was
happening, I think,
What's
right?
Happening Now.
Yeah.
What's Happening Now? That was the other one. Um, it was premiering. It was designed for prime access, so it was going to come on at 7 or 7:30 kind of thing in the evening, and then it was going to rerun on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And I think at the time, I don't think that Karen or I, and when I say Karen Richmond, who was
Right.
Gidget in that situation, and we were really at the center of that in the rom com. Um, I don't think we realized at the time the implication that the time periods were going to have on what the show would become and what it inevitably needed to become. It needed to become a show that was going to appeal much more strongly to a young teen, preteen, young teen audience, particularly because it was going to rerun on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And so we went from being a rom-com to a live action cartoon is really what that's how it evolved. And um, I don't think Karen or I were really prepared for that. I think we stepped into it in the best of our ability. I think that, I'm grateful that I went and spent some time at the Groundlings in Los Angeles, wonderful improvisational comedy company that
Right.
did a lot of great training for actors in that kind of work. And just loosened me up a little bit to step into something that was going to have more of a sitcom and young sitcom kind of a vibe to it. Um, the show, our series experience started with one executive producer, well, with two executive producers, but a different showrunner. And very quickly, as the realization of the rerun of the syndicated audience or the syndicated time periods became clear, we moved from one showrunner to another showrunner who was the showrunner we went to was a guy named Larry Mullen. Larry had done executive produced over 100 episodes of Beverly Hills 90210. So Larry understood youth culture, and now 90210 was more soapy, and it was kids were older, playing older than what the characters perhaps would have been doing. But Larry I think had a good take on kids, and on the sort of the silliness and the fun that kids wanted to see, and he was able to take the show and spin it in a different direction. And Larry did a great job. Because it's not the way it was initially conceived, and he had to turn it. It's one of those things where a big ship in the ocean turns slowly. Well, Larry had to be like a little speedboat. He
Right.
had to turn it really fast, and he did. He did. We became I think Karen and I went there kicking and screaming a little bit because we just didn't. It just wasn't
Yeah.
what we were expecting.
Right.
But we did go there. I'm bummed that it's never really had any afterlife beyond its original syndication, and the reason is the all the music.
Of
It's all
course.
the
Yeah.
Beach Boys music,
Right.
and the entities that gained control of the show, or that ultimately, and now it's owned by Sony, um, were not prepared to spend the money to either rescore or re-up those rights. And Beach Boys music is not inexpensive to work with. So I think that's probably the largest reason that it's largely just disappeared from the public consciousness. Um, was just the notes on the notes on the in the score were just those songs, those lyrics were just really expensive to play with. It was great to have access to them in a
Yeah.
5-year deal, but after that, the renewal was going to be onerous,
Right.
so it stopped.
Yeah. I know they have episodes on YouTube, but that doesn't help you with any
Yeah,
residuals or anything.
no, and I've heard that. I've heard story that's that some service in Canada is running it,
Okay.
but I've never seen, I don't think Karen and I have ever seen a dime from that. And now Larry is getting paid for it
Of course.
some way, but we've never seen anything on that. And, I don't think I don't think it would be, it's never going to be money that is meaningful,
Yeah.
so it's like, I just haven't pushed on it at all. I mean, if something miraculous happened there, that would be great. But I don't see that Gidget's ever going to see the light of day again. And now who knows how that would play.
Right.
That was such a contemporary show. The fashion, the look, all of it was right in the sweet spot of where youth culture was at that moment. And youth culture is in a very different place now. So I'm
Yeah.
not so sure that, that
Right.
even if you could bring it back, if it would work.
Yeah. Probably not. But yeah, I had such a crush on Sydney Penny on
Oh,
watching.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. How old know?
I'm 49 right now.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
I could totally get that.
Yeah.
Sydney was so beautiful to photograph. I never saw a bad picture of Sydney. She just was, her features, her energy, all of it was just one gorgeous picture of her after another. And I just don't know, what made that possible, because when you're photographed that much, there are going to be some bad pictures. I
Right.
never saw a bad picture of Sydney. It just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
Just really a beautiful, beautiful woman, and Sydney was very self-contained. Sydney knew what Sydney was about, and she was not going to be pushed to become something that she was not totally comfortable with. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why Lily Hayden was brought into the show to play her best friend, because Lily had a wonderful access to a very sort of cool humor. Her mother was a comedian.
Right.
So that character could be the source of some of the silliness that Sydney was. Sydney could respond to it, but she wasn't going to drive that. That became Lily's job, to drive this sort of the silliness of the accessibility of the humor. Sydney was just incredible to look at. And really an amazing presence. I know Karen had more than a few days of anxiety, feeling like she had to stand next to Sydney on the beach in a bikini.
Right.
Karen gave nothing away in that category. I think Karen held her own very well, but she had certainly anxiety about Sydney's aesthetic perfection, that gave her pause from time to time.
Right. No question. And Sydney went on to really successful career doing soaps and whatnot. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, she did
Oh
really
no.
nice for herself. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think she's done. I think she's done really well. And she had a nice family. Clearly, her mother and father loved her and cared about her and kept a close eye on her. There was going to be no, I mean, this, at least, and I have not had any sort of ongoing contact with Sydney, but you never felt like Sydney was going to go off the rails.
Right.
You know, there was too much love and caring around her for that to happen. So she was in good hands. She was in very, it struck us all that she was in very good hands. And I hope that's the case, and I hope that it worked that way. The fact that we have not seen Sydney in cautionary tale headlines suggests
Exactly.
that the work her parents did was, as
Right.
parents, was really solid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, another role you played Buffy, the Vampire Slayer's father, Hank Summers, and
Hank Summers,
yeah,
yes.
a few
Yeah.
episodes, but
Yeah.
yeah, complicated relationship, no doubt. What did you draw from your relationship with your real life father for that?
I don't think so. I don't think I
Okay.
had really processed my relationship with my dad at that point. I was in it, but I think that was a challenging time for me, Noel. When I was hired for that, I think my my recollection of that audition was that final audition was, and it's such a funny thing with actors. You actors like to talk about having the room in focus when you go into it. I mean, it shows that if the room's in focus, you're present, you see who's there, you're feeling the moment. Um, all I can say is going into the room for that meeting, my world was completely out of focus. I didn't see anybody in the
Right.
room. I don't know that I was really there. Um, and Anson Williams, who was an old friend who the world knew as Potsy Weber
Yep.
on Happy Days, and Anson had become a director, and somehow he was plugged into the casting of this. I have no idea why he was there, but and I didn't. The bizarre thing, Noel, is I didn't see him in the room.
Okay.
I mean, he was. This was not a dark room.
Right.
This was a well-lit room. I remember walking into the well-lit room, but I didn't see anybody in the room. Most particularly, I didn't see Anson. If I'd been in focus, I would have seen him. I didn't see him, and I think that spoke to how not in focus I was at that moment. But Anson tells the story that at the end of the reading, when the readings were over, he turned to those in the room and said, I know this guy, give it to him. I mean, I think they knew that Hank Summers was never going to be a huge part of the series, but I think one of the sort of fun things about the casting choice was that the perception of me would have been to be the perfect dad, a great dad, a loving
Right.
dad, a thoughtful person, a good partner, all that. And Hank Summers was a little detached from being really a good dad or a good husband or any of that. He was a little bit of an enigma that way. And I think that worked. That contrast of the expectation of what I was versus what they knew they were going to do with the character actually worked. I think it was actually turned out to be sort of a good idea. Um, I love that group of people. And I think the talent level in that show, in front of the camera and behind the camera, was significant. Um, and Joss Whedon is a brilliant guy. I mean, obviously he's had his issues.
Issues. Yep.
Yeah, he's had his issues, but his point of view about what he was doing, that was another case of, like Michael Landon, Joss Whedon was crystal clear about what he was trying to do with the show and the humor that he was creating. And he was so plugged in visually. He knew what the look was. He was all over it, and you just knew he was really in charge of this. And I just remember going the first time I shot with them, and this was before it had started airing, the crew was so excited about the show, and that's a really good sign.
Right.
Crews have seen everything, and if it wasn't good, there would have been like, they wouldn't have said much. But I just remember that makeup, hair, costume crew that every actor interfaces with immediately when you step into a situation, because you have to. They were so all in on the show. They were excited about it. They thought it was very cool and fun and quirky and all the things that it was. So you sort of knew you were stepping into something interesting,
Yeah.
because of that.
The,
Well, and look, I say, Noel, I got a trading card out of it.
right. Yeah.
I got a Buffy trading card, which I was, when that happened, I was just so not expecting that.
Right. That's awesome. Not for an
Yeah, for 5
unsuccessful high school
episodes, I got the
athlete.
trading
Yeah,
card. Yeah, I mean, I
absolutely.
thought that was fun. Yeah,
Yeah. And
I,
so,
I can buy one for $29 on eBay now. I'm tempted to go on, and I just heard about this the other day that someone put a picture of one up on the screen as I was having a conversation with them, and said, "Well, I got to go buy that." I mean, I don't
you
have,
should.
I did the signatures and sent them back. I didn't keep any,
Right.
so I need to get one.
Oh, so they're already signed cards.
Oh yeah, they're signed.
Oh,
They
okay.
sent me 2,500 cards for me to sign,
Gotcha. Okay.
and maybe there were other cards, but the one I saw online was a signed card. And so I spent a couple of evenings signing all these cards and put them back and then shipped them out, and they went where they went, and I never saw them again. So I think I need to get one.
Yeah, I was gonna say because if they weren't signed, you can just buy one off eBay, sign it, and then put it back on eBay for more money.
Oh, yeah. No, I think I don't think yeah, I'm gonna be buying one that has a signature on it. So
Okay.
I can be reunited with my signature.
Yeah. And I'm looking right now. There's one for 24.99 for
Beautiful.
$1.99 shipping, but it's near mint condition. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have to have it.
Yeah. And you have a very nice signature, by the way.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I like to think it's legible. Now, the
Yeah.
rest of my writing is not particularly legible, but my signature is legible.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
why I can never be famous. My handwriting is terrible and I
You should have
can't
been a
sign for
doctor.
anything. Yeah, I should have been
Yeah.
a doctor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
There
blame
you
my
go.
mother for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But real quick, you kind of went in a different direction with your career and you started executive producing the show Feherty.
Yeah.
People don't know he was, golfer, Dear Feherty, who on the Golf Network. Let's talk about how that all came about.
So I had been, um, it was a 3-part process. I had worked with one of the first things I did as a producer was, I did some documentary work, they were biography type things, and they were very small, and they were for me and for a close in group of people. But I ended up doing some post production at a company called Gears in Burbank, and found out that they were very involved in motorsports, and I was intrigued with technology. I've never been a racing guy, but I was intrigued with that, and I ended up doing some interviews of race drivers and that sort of thing for a film, and they did contact coverage for Toyota and for Honda. So this was a pretty big deal. They were involved at a very high level, and they captured the sport beautifully on film. So I did interviews for them, and at that time, I met the VP of television for championship auto racing teams, a guy named Keith Allo, who became a friend then and has remained a good friend. And Keith went from championship auto racing teams to the United States Olympic Committee to run television there. And I ended up doing 2 Olympic Hall of Fame telecasts, one for NBC and one for USA Network, with him there. And then Keith got another job at NBC Golf and won, in 2011, early in May, just like it could have been like right about now. Actually, all those years ago, I got a call from him in my office. He would call me, we'd speak, right, some, not regularly, but often enough. and he called me and he threw this opportunity out at me. He said, how would you like to come to Florida and produce this new talk show we're doing? Well, I don't play golf.
Right.
I'd never heard of David Feherty. I didn't, because I wasn't watching CBS golf,
Right.
where he was at that time. But Keith assured me that, this was about storytelling and he believed in me as a storyteller. Um, and because it was Keith, I just jumped on it. If Keith called me with any opportunity to this day, I would be on a plane to wherever he wanted to go. He's just been that good a partner for me. And he's a guy that he was certainly watching this very closely because he was the executive producer of it. But he's a guy who always has empowered people that he works with to do what he's hiring them to do. And so he gives you a great sense of confidence that he believes in what you're doing. And so jumping into that situation and meeting David for the first time, which was one of the David is one of the most. Do you play golf? I mean, golf. You've been involved in the sports world.
I haven't played in years, so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's true for a lot of people that
Right.
they say they play, but they don't play for years.
Yeah.
It's one of those games.
Yeah.
But David is just a very unique personality, and with a fascinating point of view about the game and about life. And he has lived as hard a life as anybody out there. Is the fact that he's still alive to tell stories about how hard he's lived is amazing. And you could just tell David, you've been in this world, Noel. I mean, you can point a camera at people and some people come right, some people the camera sees, but really nothing happens.
Right.
And there are other people you point the camera at and their whole soul jumps through the lens. And David is one of those people. I long thought David would have been, if he could have tolerated the waiting, he could have been a wonderful actor. He just has that quality about him. And David just hits the lens like $1,000,000. You see everything in his eyes, and he's very comfortable existing in front of the camera. And just when you started hearing the kinds of questions and the kinds of conversations he was having with people, it just drew me in. And I had 10 really fun years working on Feherty at NBC Golf in Orlando, Florida. And we traveled all over the world doing conversations with obviously great golfers,
Right.
Entertainers, captains of industry, people who the Golf Channel audience would be interested in talking to. And the Golf Channel audience is one of the most upscale demographic audiences of anywhere on television.
Right.
It's a pretty well educated, tuned in, economically viable group of people. And so they are they're very attuned to what's going on, and they appreciated David's quirky way of looking at the world. And so it was a lot of fun working with him. He's a special talent.
Yeah, I was definitely a fan of the show. It was definitely interesting. It didn't matter if I knew the guest or even liked the guest.
It wouldn't have mattered. No, it wouldn't have mattered at all.
It didn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, the golf, it's fortunate that, because it was Golf Channel, there always needed to be a golf component in the show because of what it was. But, a lot of the conversation ranged well away from golf. We certainly were not doing coverage. We didn't shoot at events. We were traveling to people's homes all over the world, going to the places where they played privately, meeting them in restaurants or whatever. And we just had some great conversations with people. And he just was fun. He was fun to be with. And David is one of the most, he was so hands off with the people who were with the team that was creating the show. I mean, I only got one call from David in the 10 years that we were doing the show with him, asking me to change out a shot. And it's because
Right.
he had mooned an alligator during an opening of a show. Now we had blurred the mooning. You
Right.
were never going to see the vital truth
Yeah.
of David, but he had been warned by CBS, who he was still working for at the time. He had done a cover for a magazine where he was standing with his pants down in front of a toilet. And CBS let him know that if he ever did anything like that again, he would be fired.
Right.
And so 90 minutes before the show was going to go on the air, I got a call in the control room, in the edit room, because we were finishing. I mean, we were right up to the minute all the time on the show.
Course, yeah.
And he called and said, Dino, you can't show me mooning the gator, because they'll fire me at CBS. Well, David had never asked for anything.
Right.
I mean, nothing. There'd never been a negative, a comment. He'd always just been fine with everything. So when David asked to take out the mooning, and it was just like, are we going to make this air?
Yeah.
If we do this, this is really you're balancing the need to take care of your host, someone you care about, and you want to give him what he needs, because he never needs anything, with the reality that if we blew it, we would not make air, and that would cost all of us a huge problem. So I called our EP, I called Keith and said, this is what David needs. And he just said, do it, make it work. And so, by God, we made it work. And I think we got on the air the show was ready to go with about 3 minutes to spare.
Yeah, it's the magic of live TV. Somehow get it done.
You get it done because you have to. You have to.
Absolutely. I thought you were going to call. I thought he was going to call and tell you to blow out the gator.
No. I mean, we actually replaced the mooning with the gator.
Okay.
So we had a shot of the gator in the water, and so the editor, instead of the mooning, we cut to the gator, and it all worked fine. It was literally like it was a 20-second edit,
right?
But the round trip to reload the show, QC it, and have it ready for air, that was going to be like a 90-minute process. Right. Yeah. And so that's the rub. The fix itself was nothing. It was all of the rushing, hoping the show would feed back onto the server in time to make it to air. That was the big challenge. But we got there.
Right. All those servers.
Oh my God.
Know them too well.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. But Dean, this was fantastic. Thank you for your time today. Everyone check out Prairie Man, My Little House, Life and Beyond. It comes out June 25th, Kindle, hardcover. Is there an Audible version?
There will be. I'm recording it later this month, and I don't know when it will actually come out, but I am doing the recording late in May. Yeah, cool. So I'm excited about that. That's probably the thing that I'm really excited about that, because I just love doing that.
Right. Absolutely. So I might have to listen to that version because reading it was fantastic. So I want to hear your voice.
Aren't you nice?
Stories would be great. But yeah,
thank you.
Once again, thank you so much, Dean.
My pleasure.
And a special thanks to Dean for joining me today. Go check out Prairie Man, My Little House, Life and Beyond. It is wherever books are sold. It is out now. It is a fantastic read. If you have a guest suggestion, hit me up on X, formerly Twitter, @personal19, or like the page Really My Youth on Facebook. Go to iTunes, check out all the past episodes we've had. While you're there, please rate and review the show. Don't have iTunes? Not a problem. It goes on SoundCloud, Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, basically wherever you find a podcast. A new episode will be out soon. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you then.